unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Pull up a chair. Maybe a bar stool. Welcome in. Quick update from my tiny black cat Tomato, who has been meowing outside of the door to my room here. He would like you to know, and me to know, that he wants attention. That is all. We got a great lineup for you tonight. Now, speaking of pets, we go from cats to dogs. As everyone knows, dogs are the boys and cats are the girls, and when mommy cat and daddy dog have a baby, if it's a girl, it's a cat, and if it's a boy, it's a dog. Okay, none of that's true. But speaking of dogs, we tend to think that we can read our dog's feelings. You know, when they're happy, when they're sad, when they feel guilty. But the research suggests that despite feeling like we know where our dogs are emotionally, we can't read our dogs well at all. So why do humans think they deeply understand their pups and what's really going on behind your puppy's puppy dog eyes? That we'll cover in about 10 minutes' time. After that, more on pets, and by pets I mean the Loch Ness monster. New evidence discovered at the bottom of the Loch Ness. I think Loch means lake in Scottish or something. That's right, a camera setup, 40, 50 years ago was discovered on the bottom of the lake, rigged to take pictures of the Loch Ness monster. It was recovered, the film was not damaged, and pictures were taken of what? We'll find out halfway through the hour. On a little weekly time we call on this show Conspiracy Corner. That is merely some of what you'll hear tonight. And like my cat wants me to pay attention to him, let's pay attention to some of the more offbeat stories of the day after this.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
I want to start this story the same way you shouldn't start a relationship. It's emotionally complicated, may involve wild animals, and someone might get arrested. This week in Pahrump, Nevada. Yes, that's a real place, not the sound a raccoon makes when it falls into a kiddie pool. A 71-year-old man was arrested after authorities seized 7 of his tigers. That's not one tiger, not 2, which would be a pair of tasteful matching tigers like throw pillows, but 7 full-sized tigers. And why? Because he claimed they were his emotional support animals. That's right, his emotional support tigers. Which raises 2 important questions. 1, what emotional state requires the presence of 7 apex predators to soothe you, to give you emotional support? And 2, how bad was this dude's childhood? The local county sheriff's office said the man didn't have the permits for the big cats. It would seem in that county you would need a special conditions animal permit to own a jungle death machine. Makes sense. In most towns, you need a permit just to build a slightly too tall fence. But this guy's out here with 7 carnivores that would make great throw rugs that could star in Jumanji 7, Big Therapy Cat Revenge. The local sheriff said there were social media posts showing people interacting with these tigers, which is adorable in theory and an HBO documentary in practice. Meanwhile, the owner insists the cats were harmless. He says he even rescued them from Joe Exotic. Remember that felon mullet-wearing magician of Tiger King fame? What a weird time it was when Tiger King came out. I don't know about you, but if Joe Exotic gives you a tiger, I think that tiger should come with a warning label that reads, "May contain vengeance." Now, I don't want to rain on the parade of people who genuinely need emotional support animals. The need is real, important, and can be helpful. But according to the relevant legislation, they cannot be tigers. Emotional support dogs? Sure. Cats? Maybe. Even a hedgehog if you're quirky. But when your therapy animal can swallow your therapist, something's off. During the raid, the owner of the tigers refused to give up the keys to their tiger cages, which is the most Nevada sentence I've said all week. Imagine the standoff. "Sir, hand over the keys." "To what?" "The tigers." Anyway, reportedly, animal control took the cats to a secret sanctuary once they were confiscated. A secret sanctuary, which is what I'll be calling my bedroom from now on. Oh, and surprise, surprise, the owner of the tigers has a little bit of history with the county that seized them. In 2020, he and his wife sued the county for over $1 million, claiming the government was trying to steal their emotional support tigers and ruin their lives. Which, I mean, I get it. It's hard to rebuild your trust with your spouse after the county seizes your big cats. You might have to say something to your wife like, "Honey, are we okay? Or was your love for me just tiger adjacent?" The cops also found a gun on him, and because he's a convicted felon, he is not allowed to have one. But look, who among us hasn't been arrested, hoarded endangered carnivores, and violated gun laws all in the name of emotional well-being? The owner of the cats is currently released on $6,000 bail for 7 tigers. That's like $850 some odd per tiger, which is kind of a good deal. It's not so much bail as it is, well, a Groupon. The cats, meanwhile, were found underweight, and their water dishes had algae in them, which is no way to treat your emotional support tiger if you ask me. The man's due back in court in May, and honestly, I do hope he shows up with a full safari outfit, preferably riding a unicycle, just to, extend the bit a little more. So here's my take. If you're sad, get a cat. A normal-sized cat. If you're depressed, maybe get a dog. But if you're deeply broken on a soul level, try therapy, not tigers. Here's a little Canadian story from North Vancouver that, depending on how you look at it, is either a tale of everyday heroism or just proof that brunch is getting way too intense. A police officer, a member of the RCMP, was out doing his usual patrol. The glamorous life of dodging domestic disputes, investigating suspicious occurrences, and probably yelling at a shirtless man named Gary. And during that patrol, he got flagged down near a restaurant. As luck would have it, someone had fallen and become trapped under a table in that restaurant, which I've got to say is a very special form of public humiliation. I mean, I've passed out at a Seder before, but no one ever had to get out a screwdriver to help me. Now, the officer, realizing that police work was needed, did just that. He borrowed a screwdriver from the staff of the restaurant and dismantled the table. Now, that's a classy rescue at a classy establishment when the tools required are from Canadian Tire. The good news is this person was freed without injury. The bad news is they now have to live with the fact that they were literally unscrewed from brunch by law enforcement. I hope those Eggs Benedict were really worth it. Now, the North Vancouver RCMP tweeted about the incident with the phrase, "No call, too small," which sounds noble in theory, but also feels like a passive-aggressive warning to the general public. Yes, Karen, we will show up if you call about your neighbor's wind chimes again. Honestly, though, the whole story, a little bit touching. We live in a world where cops are often criticized, and sometimes rightly, for doing too much or too little. But here's a moment where someone just showed up with a screwdriver and did the exact right thing at the exact right time. It's the Canadian version of MacGyver, only gentler and with more apologies, I assume. Anyway, I'd personally like to thank this officer for proving that the modern police toolkit now should include basic IKEA assembly skills. And this means that if you too can take apart a table, you're one Allen key away from solving world peace, or a screwdriver in this case. So let this be a lesson to us all. When life knocks you down and you find yourself trapped under a metaphorical or literal table, may someone nearby have both a screwdriver and the patience to take the whole thing apart for you. Anyway, that's what's happening in North Vancouver. No call too small, no table too sturdy, and no brunch too chaotic for the Mounties. Up next, if you've ever had a dog, you probably think you can read what that dog's feeling just on its face, just by the way it wags its tail. But it turns out, according to research, humans aren't great at reading pups. That's right. You think a wagging tail means the dog's happy? Wrong. But how could that possibly be true? I understand Rover better than anyone. We'll tell you why humans are generally so bad at reading dogs' emotions after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888 505 6644. Smart, sharp, and slightly unhinged. Late night's fresh perspective. The Last Show with David Cooper.
We tend to think that dogs show us their feelings, and they do, but we're kind of bad at reading them. For example, some people think a wagging tail generally means a dog's happy, and those people would be wrong, at least some of the time. It just means that a dog's emotionally aroused. Could be good, could be bad. That's just one example, but let's dig into what dogs really are trying to tell us and why we're not necessarily great at reading those signals. I'm here with Holly Molinaro, who's a dog researcher with the psychology department at Arizona State University. Holly, what a pleasure it is to have you here.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
We're okay at reading other people's signals, maybe.
Yeah, no.
Why would we think we're good at reading dogs? I think people think dogs are easy to read, and they're not.
Yeah. Every time I tell people what I'm researching, they go, okay, but I know what my dog's feeling. Even though I just told them I study that we're really bad at understanding dog emotions. So people just, they're so strong in their opinions that they know what the dog is feeling.
I think because we feel very attached to our dogs, and that's fine and well. But if we just did a little bit of work and tried to understand what they really meant and not what we think they mean, maybe we could do an okay job with it. Why are we so bad at reading our dog's emotions?
Yeah. One has to do with a fancy word the scientists use called anthropomorphism, which just means attributing human characteristics onto non-human things. And we do this with everything. We do this with like cars. We know what the eyelashes on them. It's just like a natural thing that humans do. So we do that with dogs. We like to see ourselves in them. So that's one big thing. But then my study that I just recently did showed that we don't actually look at the dog at all. We look at the context of the situation.
Okay, and what are some of the contexts in which we could be reading our dog's emotions? Maybe wrong.
Yeah, so for example, you see a dog seeing its leash, you assume it's happy because it's going to go out for a walk. You see a dog seeing a vacuum cleaner, you assume it's going to be sad because dogs don't like vacuum cleaners.
My kitty doesn't like a vacuum either. I once, side note, this is a silly trail off, but I once saw somebody who rigged a motion sensor to activate a plug, and then the plug turned on the vacuum, and the motion sensor was near the Christmas tree. So every time the pets came near the Christmas tree to destroy it, the vacuum... Anyway, not important.
That's pretty smart, though.
I've been wanting to do that for a very long time. Let's get back on track here. So if context influences it, but the dog's body language doesn't change, what does that tell us about how our brain works when it comes to emotion recognition? That's how we do it for people too, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So I base my study off of human studies. So there's a lot of human studies showing that we look at the context. For example, there was a study where they photoshopped a man's face onto different body postures. So for one, he was like holding a stinky diaper, and for another, he was like being held at gunpoint. But the face was exactly the same. And they found that people rated the man's face differently based on the situation, even though it was exactly the same.
And he was terrified of the diaper, and he thought the smell of the gun was terrible, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or most men are terrified of all diapers. Okay, so puppy dog eyes, what are those?
Yes. Oh, that's like such a interesting question, because maybe 10 years ago, all scientists were saying it's a way for dogs to communicate. They have evolved this like facial expression to connect into each other's eyes. And actually, if they make that face, they're more likely to be adopted. So that further proves it. And then in recent years, people have been like, no, we don't actually know what's going on here. We need to do more research because now we know coyotes can actually make that puppy dog eye. So it kind of disproves everything that we just thought in the past 10 years.
Coyotes being forbidden dogs. You just can't pet them even if they look friendly.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though they're making those puppy dog eyes, don't pet them, please.
I see videos of like black panthers doing the same thing my cat does. And I'm like, that's a forbidden kitty cat. Do not pet it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're really taking this human thing of evaluating an animal based on its context and thinking we definitively know what it's thinking. We don't. But what do we know? I mean, for example, the introduction here, I was talking about a wagging tail. That does mean something.
Yes. Yeah. So scientists, at the moment, we know that a wagging tail, like you said, just like emotional arousal. So, but that could be positive feelings or negative feelings. And it really depends on the dog's personality and individual dog. So you really have to be in tune to your own dog, as opposed to just being like, oh, tail wagging equals happy, end of story.
Are there other signals that we could be reading correctly? It might not be what we think it is, but we could be reading it correctly. For example, if I said of all dogs, a wagging tail just means it's aroused. I don't know if it likes me or not.
Yeah.
I would be right, generally speaking. Are there other signals like that?
So there's like really strong ones like tail between the legs, like tucked between the legs, like not good. But again, we can't say like fear or I like to stay away from human emotions and just kind of stick to positive or negative because we're not really sure exactly what that emotion is. But then again, there's like the stereotypical play bow, which is even in the name implies that it must be positive because a dog's sticking its butt up in the air. But in my study, the dog that we used did the play bow for both the vacuum and getting a treat. So even in that case, that's a little misleading.
I'm here with Holly Molinaro talking about how we're not great at reading dogs' emotions. There is a specific facial muscle that wolves don't have and that dogs have. Can we read that? Why is that there? Have they evolved to emotionally manipulate us?
That is such a good question because I actually know researchers who are studying that at this very moment. And what we think is that those early studies with wolves maybe weren't exactly correct.
So they might not have evolved to manipulate us.
Or we just only studied wolves and dogs. And like there's the African painted dogs, which are these really pretty dogs from Africa. They also have that eye muscle. And like they don't live near humans at all. So I think there's a lot more into what that eye muscle really means than we know at this point.
There might be a common ancestor to dogs that have this muscle that wasn't domesticated. So we're not 100% sure what it does and what the history of it is.
Exactly.
Social media, it's full of viral videos where dogs are feeling shame, they're feeling happiness, they're laughing. At least that's what the captions would have you read. Are we doing more harm than good by posting these videos? Or are they a gateway to better understanding our pets?
That's such a good question. My dad loves to send me those, and because he knows I get really annoyed at them.
I want your dad on the show. So maybe we have him here like Jerry Springer style. Jerry, your daughter's research is wrong. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah. No, the like one he always sends me is like the dog watching The Lion King, and like the dog is crying when like Mufasa falls off the rock. And I'm like, no, it's just whining at something else, Dad. Like, stop.
Homeboy's cutting onions in the corner, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's fun for sure, but I think it reinforces the idea that we know what dogs are feeling. And that ultimately, like with your pet dog, for the most part, you're not going to put your pet dog in like a bad state. But when it comes to just caring for animals in general, if we keep having this reinforcing belief that we know what they're feeling, it can ultimately, we can be putting them in situations that they don't actually like, but we think they do. So while I find those videos very cute and fun, I am always tempted to like post it and be like, the dog's not actually feeling this. Like, stop laughing at it.
Let's flip it around here for a second. How good are dogs at reading our emotions? Do they really understand when we're happy, sad, mad? I once had a mental emotional breakdown about 10 years ago. I was getting divorced, not important. I was at my brother's house crying, and his dog put his nose on my leg. It was a very special moment.
Yeah, I bet.
Are they good at reading us?
Yeah, so actually there's so much studies about that dogs are really attuned to our emotional well-being, our behavior, and they pick up on things that we might not even recognize that we're doing. For example, I like to talk about the guilty look that you see in dogs. There's been a couple studies showcasing that even if a dog doesn't do anything wrong, right? If we tell the dog's owner that the dog did something wrong, the dog will make that guilty face because they're picking up on what the owner is like about to like reprimand them or something. So they're picking up on things we're not even aware, and we are sadly not as good as it as they are with us.
One thing that really underscores your research for me is kids aren't great at reading dogs' emotions. You know, when kids are kind of more instinct driven, they're not really like, they haven't learned a lot of things from adults yet. If kids aren't great at it and we're not really evolved to be great at it at a basic instinctual level, we shouldn't think we are.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think it'd be great to start teaching kids from an early age, about this stuff. And maybe eventually we'll be really good at it.
Well, Holly, thanks for chatting with me, sharing your research. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Holly Molinaro is a dog researcher with the psychology department at Arizona State University. When we come back, a newly discovered camera at the bottom of Loch Ness that may contain photos and irrefutable proof of the Loch Ness monster. That and more adorable and ferocious Nessie in a few moments.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Your nightly rebellion against predictable radio and podcasts. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Newly discovered evidence of the Loch Ness monster potentially is here, and the crowd may go wild. We'll find out all about it on Conspiracy Corner with Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiratorial conspiracy studies, I think.
That sounds right.
And host of the Uncover Up podcast, a podcast that digs deep into your favorite theories of conspiracy. This year, I think it's End of the World conspiracies.
Yeah, that's our theme, is the end of the world. Seemed appropriate.
Yes. I haven't checked my brokerage account in a week.
I'm sure it's fine. I don't think anything's happened recently.
Will I be able to pay my taxes? That's the cliffhanger for my year, okay?
Well, I mean, the good news is maybe there won't be a government to pay taxes to.
Oh, yeah. I guess is that how it worked in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed? It was like, oh, we don't have to pay any taxes for a minute.
Yeah, we're just in complete anarchy. So all sorts of stuff to look forward to this year.
Okay, Loch Ness. Let's go to the Loch of Ness in Scotland, a place where I think it holds a special place in most conspiracy theory studiers and believers and anyone who's into the weird and paranormal. It holds a special place because I feel like it's the place where conspiracy theories turned into modernity. Like it is when it goes from black and white to color, I feel like the Loch Ness monster is the focal point. Everything before it is like ancient Romans, and everything after it is like UFOs and modern stuff.
No, you're totally correct. And also, like from a personal perspective, it was the first cryptid story that I had ever heard. As a kid, you get those Time Life collection books, and there was all sorts of chapters on Loch Ness Monster, and I would just pore over them and think, someday I'm going to find this thing.
And there was photographic evidence. There was video evidence. I mean, it's all grainy and in black and white, but at least there was something modern. It wasn't just a painted picture of the pyramids or an article in a newspaper from 400 years ago. All right, let's talk my favorite vessel, because a vessel was in Loch Ness. It's a British vessel. And 10, 15 years ago, there was a competition to name this submarine.
Yeah, I mean, this is a wild aspect of this story. So last week, the UK National Oceanography Centre was testing one of its robot submarines in a lake in Scotland. Of course, not just any lake, but Loch Ness. And not just any robot submarine, because this robot submarine is named Boaty McBoatface.
Dun, dun, dun. There was a competition to name this boat, and I think this speaks really well to British humor. The name that won, and it became like an internet meme, I think they wanted to go for a more serious name, was Boaty McBoatface. And I think everyone in the British media, it was led by some radio host or something. I forget exactly the story, but yeah, Boaty McBoatface. Now John Oliver, the comedian, leads in naming competitions to make up stupid names like Bridgie McBridgeface. But yeah, I love that this government or this quasi-government or this public-funded organization named their submarine Boaty McBoatface.
Well, I mean, the thing was, it was originally the UK government holding an online poll to name like a new polar icebreaker. And of course, Boaty McBoatface won, but the government chickened out and they named that ship the Sir David Attenborough. But one of the robot subs was named Boaty McBoatface to keep the internet happy.
Side note, the fact that a submarine is named Boaty McBoatface when it's not a boat, also very funny to me.
I know, it should be Subby McSubface, obviously, but I mean, we can't get everything we want.
We can't. All right, so Boaty McBoatface, Boaty McBoatface is in Loch Ness doing some test or something. What does it discover?
So it's patrolling the depths of the loch. It's about 400 feet down, and it snags on something. And so the researchers are like, oh no, we got to bring this thing back up to the surface. And when it comes up to the surface, it had been tangled in some weird looking apparatus, and it had brought that back up with it. And included in that strange apparatus was a glass cylinder about the size of a small bucket. And inside that sealed glass cylinder was an old 1970s Instamatic camera with a flash. And what they realized was this was part of an elaborate camera trap that had been built in the 70s and lowered into the Loch and then lost during a storm. The idea was that Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, would swim by and grab a lure, which would then trigger the camera and take a picture of the monster. And I have to say, this contraption had been built and designed pretty well, because when the cylinder was recovered and opened, the camera was dry and it had taken some pictures.
Ooh, and at the end of this interview, we will reveal what was on those pictures, possibly proving the existence once and for all of the Loch Ness Monster, or at least grainy photos of it. Let's go back in time, though. The Loch Ness Monster. When was the first sighting of it? When did people start getting excited about it? Tell me about the history of this beast, this dinosaur-like swimming thing with a long neck and, I don't know, little fin thingies.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk about the Loch Ness Monster. So there's a field of study that's kind of adjacent to conspiracy theory. It's called cryptozoology, and it's the study of hidden animals that aren't admitted to exist, like your Bigfoot, your Mothman, chupacabra, jackalope, sheep squatch, all of these things. And for the most part, they haven't had a ton of success, although they did find the coelacanth fish discovered still alive and existing in the deep ocean long after people thought it was extinct. And sailors have been talking about giant squids long before scientists admitted they were real, so there have been a few successes. But is there a Loch Ness Monster? The thing about Loch Ness, it's only about 24 miles long, maybe a mile across, but it's really deep for a lake, 700 feet in places. And there are references to a monster living in Loch Ness dating back to at least 1,500 years ago. But, I mean, there's tons of references, various monsters back in those days. I think when the Europeans first encountered beavers, they thought beavers were monsters. Basically, everything was a monster. But the modern monster starts showing up with a few eyewitness accounts in the 1870s. But in the 1930s, that's where it gets lit, which, not coincidentally, is a time when people had just seen one of the first movie depictions of giant prehistoric water monsters in the 1933 film King Kong.
Why you gotta spoil it? I feel like, there's an article about UFOs, and then boom, everyone sees UFOs. Now you gotta tell us there's this, and now everyone's seeing Nessie. Why you gotta ruin this, Nathan?
I know. It's what I'm for. It's one of the things that I'm for.
So people were primed to believe, or primed to sort of conceptualize something.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of how we understand the world comes through the images we see on screens. And so when people had seen King Kong with all that amazing claymation, those ideas started to take root in our society, and it started to become this sort of sticky idea of what a monster might look like, a water monster. But then, 1934, in the middle of Loch Ness monster mania, there was a man named Marmaduke Wetherell, a name that could only ever exist in the past. And he was hired by the Daily Mail to track down the Loch Ness Monster, and comes back almost immediately with plaster casts, physical evidence, plaster casts of enormous footprints.
Of course, which are totally impossible to fake. You can't just make a mold out of that looks like a footprint and then bring it to the newspaper.
I mean, making a mold would have been a great idea. They didn't even do that. What they did, apparently, when scientists studied these plaster casts, it turned out to be from an umbrella stand that had been made out of a hippopotamus leg.
Side note, unicorns are real. Rhinos are just overweight unicorns. But let's keep going. Okay, so the evidence not amazing at this point.
Not great. And already the scammers are showing up. The cryptid world, unfortunately, is kind of rife with scammers and hoaxers. You got the Fiji mermaid, 19th century P.T. Barnum, the giant penguin of Clearwater, Florida in the 40s, the Brooksfield monster in 1950s. And so Marmaduke Wetherell, middle name Arundel.
Marmaduke Arundel Wetherell. Man, that is a great name.
That's a lot. So when he gets publicly called up for his hoax to enact his revenge on the world that had mocked him, he has his son and some friends build a fake monster out of a toy submarine. And they put that in the lake and they snap some pics of it. And this is the picture that most people have seen of the Loch Ness Monster, the famous surgeon's photograph.
When we come back with Nathan Radke on Conspiracy Corner, we'll continue the history of the Loch Ness Monster and snap us into now when newly discovered photos capturing the monster may have just been found by a submarine. It's Conspiracy Corner. We'll be back.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting intimate details and useless information from an undisclosed location in New York City. The Last Show with David Cooper.
The Loch Ness Monster, the world's favorite, maybe fictional sea creature. Until now, we've gone over the evidence till about the 1930s. Seems to be hoaxes, seems to be a toy submarine, seems to be a plaster cast of a hippopotamus foot. We're here with Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies. It's Conspiracy Corner. Let's just catch people up. Boaty McBoatface, a British submarine, went to the depths of Loch Ness, captured an old camera from the 70s with undeveloped film on it that was down there to capture the Loch Ness Monster. And when we get to the end of this interview, we'll tell you what was on it. Nathan, welcome back.
That was a good teaser.
Thank you. I know. I've been working on those, crying in front of the mirror. Not important. All right. So Marmaduke Weatherroll. Tell me who he is again. I love that name.
Marmaduke Arundel Weatherroll was hired by the Daily Mail to go look for the Loch Ness Monster and just came back with a bunch of scams.
And then he was mad when people didn't buy it. He had his kids put a toy submarine in the loch, took some photos. That was the great grainy evidence of the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah, and since then, there's been hundreds of expeditions and surveys. There's been literally millions of tourists who have tried to get evidence of the Loch Ness Monster, and lots of people have reported seeing something. And there's been a few inconclusive photographs, including one that was taken just a couple weeks ago that looks like kind of a dark lump under the surface of the water. And again, despite everyone carrying around high-quality cameras with them all the time now, we haven't seen an explosion in high-quality Loch Ness Monster footage in the last decade, unfortunately.
I love that. Okay, so tell me more about people's fascination with the monster. Like, the crowd went wild and people were trying to hunt it over the years.
Yeah, in the 30s it was big. In the 40s, people were kind of distracted by World War II, and the Loch Ness Monster goes on the back burner. But in the 1970s, there was sort of a real interest in everything kind of spooky. So the Bermuda Triangle and flying saucers made a comeback. And, of course, the Loch Ness Monster makes a comeback. And so in 1976, there was a big sonar scan done of the lake. They didn't find any monster. They did find a crashed World War II bomber, but no monster.
That's pretty good. I mean, not bad.
I mean, still kind of interesting. And it also shows you how effective the sonar is. In 87, they do another big sweep of the lake with sonar, detected no large monsters. In 2003, the BBC did an experiment in which they took a fence post and they just floated it in the loch in front of a group of tourists and then asked them to draw what they thought they had seen. And even though it was just a fence post, when they looked at the pictures that people drew, of course, everybody drew monsters.
There's something deeper here about how we can be primed to believe in conspiracy theories. We can have what's called confirmation bias. If we really believe something and we think we're going to see something, we see it.
Oh, absolutely. We don't have direct access to reality. Everything that we encounter through our senses gets funneled through and filtered through what we expect to see and what we think of the world and our worldviews. And so it's not surprising that it's really easy to turn just a fence post into a plesiosaur.
And so the BBC sort of concluded that, yeah, people who think they see the Loch Ness, they believe they see it. And so it's not looking great.
No, and it gets worse. I mean, there was a 2018 study of the water looking for DNA traces. So we're getting properly scientific here. And they found over 3,000 animals living in or near Loch Ness. None of them were from some kind of unidentified creature or even a reptile of any kind. They found evidence of eels. And European eels can get to about 5 feet long. I mean, that's kind of monster-ish. But the thing is, Loch Ness is a pretty new lake from a geological perspective. It was carved out by glaciers during the last ice age, maybe 20,000 years ago. And plesiosaurs, again, that kind of big water creature that used to live in ancient times that people think that maybe the Loch Ness Monster is, they died off 66 million years ago.
Okay, carry the 1, divide by 2. Yeah, that's not really the same era, is it?
It is not the same era at all. And based on everything that we know about animals in general, it would be pretty much impossible for there to just be one creature in the loch one monster. That's not how life works. There'd have to be enough of them so that they could breed and continue the population.
But what about those single-cell organisms that split into two and they don't need to mate? Nessie could be that, just divide itself in half, like that slug you cut in half and it regrow. No, okay, never mind.
I mean, I like where you're going. The idea of Nessie as the world's largest single-cell organism undergoing mitosis. I mean, you're swinging for the fences, and I like that about your show.
I want to talk about moving the goalpost, but please finish your point.
I mean, the sad truth of it is, Loch Ness likely isn't big enough to support a school of giant lake monsters. There's just not enough food for them to maintain a breeding population of an animal that large. And so, as much as I want this, and this is one, I don't want every conspiracy theory to be true. Most of them you don't want to be true. But the cryptids you kind of do want. I would love to live in a world that had a Loch Ness monster in it. It makes the world a little weirder, a little bit more interesting. But sadly, it doesn't appear to be the case.
When we get things like sonar imaging pretty much the whole loch or lake, when we get DNA analysis in the water trying to look for it, when we look at the geological history of the lake and realize that it's only about 20,000 years old and the one dinosaur that Nessie could be lived many, many years before that, when the BBC puts something in the water and then asks people what they saw and they think it was the Loch Ness Monster, really proving that we can be primed to believe things, the goalpost gets moved, so to speak. We have a lot of good evidence against the Loch Ness Monster, but there will always be people who insist, oh, the monster's just hiding, or oh, the DNA's special, or oh, there must be an underground cave system that we're missing that the monster's smart enough to open a hatch to. What do people say when you kind of push them on their beliefs to really, dig their heels in the sand?
Well, when you ask what people say, if you ask what the people say whose lives depend on the tourism of people flocking to Loch Ness, I mean, this is a big industry. If you can get a lake that has a monster in it, you are going to bring in the tourist dollars. And people are buying, stuffed animals, and they're buying maps, and they're doing tours, and there are boats you can rent. It is a proper industry down there. So there's a lot of motivation to keep this thing going. And, I mean, unfortunately, the truth isn't nearly as important as simply maintaining those dollars flocking in. And people come away kind of satisfied sometimes because a ripple in the water, a bit of reflection, some floating driftwood, all of these things can be turned into a monster by our imaginations. If we went to Loch Ness and we really wanted to see something, we would see something. And
it's big bucks for Inverness, which is the closest Scottish town of 80,000 people. I'm sure their tourism industry depends on this. Let's get back in time to our conversation about 20 minutes ago when we were discussing Boaty McBoatface, the submarine that found an undeveloped underwater camera that had some photos taken.
Yep, amazing. Unbelievable. After all of those years that it worked.
And do we have good evidence now for the Loch Ness Monster? There was a trap that could be pulled and the camera would shoot. This could be it. Everything we're talking about, bad evidence, could all be invalidated right now on this show.
So here it is. The pictures were developed and they were photographs of some blurry pictures of water. But if you squint your eyes a little bit and you kind of look at it out of the corner of your eye in a dark room, somewhere in that blurriness, I bet you could still make out some kind of monster shape.
Maybe. It wasn't great evidence, I guess.
Was not.
But we teased it. This was a countdown to a letdown is what this was.
No, total letdown countdown.
Have you been over to Scotland to Loch Ness?
No, but you know what? I would love to go. I would love to just sit in a chair and just stare at the lake and let my imagination run wild and also let my hope run wild. Because just maybe there's something in there, even though all the evidence says there's almost certainly nothing.
And worst comes to worst, you have a beautiful vacation to the Scottish Highlands. That doesn't sound so bad to me.
Yeah, great view, probably pretty lousy weather.
Check out Nathan Radke's podcast, The Uncover Up. It's a podcast all about conspiracy theories. Nathan, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
After the break, things might get salacious and sexy, or maybe not, as we discuss the ick, that overwhelming feeling you get when dating someone or sleeping with them, when they do just one little thing off and you can't bear to be with them anymore. You see them in a Well, an icky light. It's happened to me. Has it happened to you? The ick and every sexy, icky thing about it in just a moment. I am David Cooper, and this is The Last Show.
Your nightly dose of unfiltered opinions and unexpected conversations. The Last Show with David Cooper.
You're dating someone. You're getting romantic. And suddenly, this immense feeling of being turned off happens because of something they did. It's called the ick. And that's what we're going to discuss here with Samantha Bitty, sexual health and consent educator on sex, etc. Samantha, I hope you don't get the ick with what we do right now on this show. That's my big worry.
I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. So I think that my window of tolerance for the ick is pretty robust. So we're good.
So you can recover from it then?
I believe so. Yeah.
I feel like in all the weeks you've come on this show, there has to have been one time when you were like, David, come on. Many times at least.
If I have, then I have compartmentalized it away.
Good.
Yeah.
Which is one of the strategies we'll get to. But the ick, you must have friends, people who write to you, people that you've talked to who are dating someone, things are going well, the sexual compatibility's there, it's fun, the romance is there, it's all going great. And then she picks her nose and he catches her. Or then, he farts and she's like, no farting around me. Or whatever it is. I mean, those are two silly examples, but there could be anything. Maybe they start telling you about how they manage their finances and you find out they've got 1,000 credit cards overdue and you're like, I can't be with someone that irresponsible. I don't know what it is, but there must be little things that you've seen, some strange, some relatable, where one person is just so turned off right away.
I would say that most of the times when folks disclose their ick to me in their relationships, it's not things that explicitly gross or disturbing, it's usually things that are it's socialized into us around gender and around, how to or how not to pursue someone. It's usually stuff like that. Like my stepsister who's in Vancouver, her and I have a really close relationship. Our parents got together when we were 10 and 11. We've stayed super close over the years. We're best friends. And I'll randomly get a text out of nowhere and she'll about an ick that she had. She'll be like, I was on a date and and then she'll tell me what the ick was. And she's like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? She's very aware of the ways that her icks are superficial and socially engineered, but she can't help it. And I find that usually the icks are stuff like that, where it's oh, they said they liked a certain thing and that turned me off.
Or they used a word too many times. I once dated someone, every other sentence, the word bummer. And I'm like, I can't, I don't know. Everything was a bummer to her. And I'm like, hey, if everything's a bummer, nothing's a bummer. And please, it's an annoying word. Bummer?
You just reminded me of one of the cringiest dates I've ever been on. This was before the pandemic, years and years and years ago. One of those things where we matched on an app and all their photos were he was confident and sexy and whatever. And then we met in person and every other thing he said, he was like, c'est la vie. And I was just like, I have to get out of here. And he wasn't French. If he was French and it was that was actually, such is life. Even then it feels it's toxic positivity, dismissive, no, just have your thought, have your feeling and die on that hill. Don't be oh, c'est la vie. But I was I literally at the date was texting someone else that I was involved with being I'm on the cringiest date of my life. What are you doing in 20? I'm getting out of here. And I forgot about that. C'est la vie.
I was once dating someone and I don't know, maybe she just forgot to brush her teeth that day and we made out and the breath was, I don't know. Everything was wrong. And then every time we made out after that, there was like this little hint of the bad breath from that day. And I couldn't get over it. And then it started like every time I was around her, the smell of the breath. And I know this is an example like your cousin. It's like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so fixated on like, maybe it was pheromones, maybe it was physical. I don't know. But there was this little seed of incompatibility that one day. And then it just blossomed into the point where I think she had issues with me too. It was kind of like a mutual breakup when we finally broke up. But yeah, that was one thing that happened to me.
I don't think that is a superficial ick. I think that is valid.
Hygiene.
Hygiene.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially I don't even want to say like especially at a certain age, but one of the things that I love about being sober and only hooking up with people who are sober is that you often don't like you avoid those kind of like icky mouth situations. Like because you're not, drinking things that mess with the chemicals in your mouth. And I actually had a date a few weeks ago and they came home with me. And the first thing I did, he wanted to kiss me. And I was like, no, I have to brush my teeth. And he was like, okay. And we like went up to my bathroom and I like brushed my teeth and he like finger brushed his teeth. He's like, I've never done this. And I'm like, ew, like we just had dinner. I don't want to like.
Yeah, you don't want semi-digested foodstuffs being exchanged in your kissing.
It's just a personal preference for me, particularly at the beginning of something. Certainly I've had relationships where, we wake up together and there might be a smooch, but I'm not like getting all up in your mouth. I don't want you all up in my mouth. I think it's icky. The part that's ick for me is when someone doesn't have the self-awareness of like, oh, maybe something is a little bit like not it, And so again, but I don't even think that's like an ick. I think that that's totally valid to be like, my preference is to have like a certain standard of hygiene in the mouth.
I'm here with Samantha Bitty discussing the ick, that time in a relationship when you just, I don't know, something turns you off. Strategies for dealing with it, because I feel like in my example, although you're validating it and hygiene mismatch is a valid thing, but you get this little whiff of something, pardon the pun there. You get this little tiny, speck of something, and then you get fixated on it. Are there things we can do other than, go to therapy every week, which I do and still, that we can try to get over this ick?
Yeah. And I think that, when it's the kind of neurotic ick where you're like, I have made this up, right? Like I'm not having a physical revulsion to this person based on stimuli. I have like made this up. I think that we can like explore in ourselves, like, where does this come from? Right? Like, is this an authentic value that I have? Is this, I think the thing, a lot of times people talk about getting the ick when someone pursues them in a certain way or flirts with them in a certain way or gives them quote unquote too much attention, for example. It's like, oh, okay, is this feeling disproportionate actually? Like, is this actually a red flag or am I just unaccustomed to this type of attention or validation? Do I only want what I can't have? That sort of thing, right? So I think that we can do some of those like internal, emotional, developmental pieces where it's like a genuine reflection on like, why is this icking me out? And you can move past it once you can identify like, oh, okay, the source of this ick is actually like an external value that I've internalized that's not real. Or you can just end the relationship and get icked out by somebody else.
I think that's good. It's self-reflect on the source, challenge your values around the source. And if you really strip away everything and the source of it is like, okay, it's a hygiene mismatch. Okay, it's like pheromones. Okay, I'm just not attracted to this. Maybe that's okay, but if it's something you were socialized or something that you believed about the kinds of people you're attracted to, the values aren't great around it, self-reflection is one way to get past it.
Yeah, and I think there will be things where it might just be an incompatibility, personality-wise, romantic, love language type stuff-wise, and like that's okay too, but we don't have to call everything an ick.
When we come back, we'll talk anxious, avoidant, disorganized, secure, attachment styles. Which one are you? Here with Samantha Bitty on Sex, Etc.
Part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Explore your deepest desires, if you dare. The last show with David Cooper.
Attachment styles. There are 4. It's one way of looking at how you relate to people. Is it the best way? That we'll find out here with Samantha Bitty on Sex Etc. She's a sexual health and consent educator. Samantha, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Anxious, avoidant, disorganized, and secure. These are 4 attachment styles. This is one way of looking at how people relate to each other. And I just want to say out of the gate, I feel like there are 3 ones that get like the short end of the stick. They all sound kind of bad. Anxious, avoidant, disorganized. On their face, these do not seem like great qualities. And then the secure ones, like that one sounds good. I feel like if we're categorizing people and how they attach to others, how they attach to their significant others, it's so unfair. There's only one good one on its face.
Yeah. And I think, you nailed it on the head when you said this is one way of understanding or evaluating the ways in which not even that we attach to a person or a thing or whatever, but that we experience attachment. Like, what are the feelings that come up based on different circumstances, dispositions? And I think that there is an over pathologizing of our behaviors, the same way that like folks are always talking about like crashing out. I'm crashing out. I'm crashing out. It's like, are you crashing out or are you having a proportionate response to a situation that was wrong? Right? Like it's like, am I anxiously attached, or is this person that I'm involved with withholding affection, attention, or things that I need, that anyone would need to feel secure?
Yeah, like, do I need the basic things I need to feel secure, or am I just anxious? Like it's a bit it's an oversimplification, but let's go through it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they can be taken at their like denotative value. A lot of them can overlap. So I once had a friend, we were having a conversation and she's like, but you're like a disorganized anxious, right? And I was like, wow, I didn't realize that I was disorganized anxious, like just that sort of thing. So some of them can kind of conflate or come together. And as you said, there is this privileging of secure attachment. Like, oh, this person has secure attachment.
Disorganized, whenever I hear that, I'm like, I have to clean my bedroom. My side of the bed has clothes on the floor. Anxious, Miranda self-identifies as anxious, and she says I'm avoidant, which I think is a recipe for disaster if you look at this at an oversimplified way. Like Miranda, my girlfriend, for those who just tuned in and don't give a crap about me, which is fine. It's everyone. That's no problem. My mother included. Yeah, but it's okay as long as like you can give the other person what they need, despite your default being maybe incompatible with them.
They say that anxious is attracted to avoidant, and there's this alchemy that happens where the needs of the anxious actually activates the needs of the avoidant, which is to pull away, and the anxious is to like constantly be seeking anchoring and validation. And I think I don't believe that people need to give each other everything they need. I really don't. I think that is codependent. Interdependency looks like you have 2 whole people who have their stuff, and then you have a relationship, and there are things that are for the relationship to work out. Like there's different things that need to happen within that relationship in order for everyone to feel at ease. And then there are the things where it's like, oh, maybe this requires a behavior change from this person that I'm in relationship with. Maybe it's a boundary that needs to be set. Maybe it's a boundary that needs to be upheld. And then there's the stuff where it's like, this is my own thing, right? And I had some clients yesterday, and we were talking about Storyland, right? The reality of all of us in relationship is that we perceive things, and then we start creating a story about what everything means. And I think when you're an anxious, it might be something like, oh, they didn't text me good morning, and they always text me good morning. And that means now that they have abandoned me and whatever, right? Like, I think that our disposition to be into Storyland is a huge factor in how we define those different or how we define, whether someone is disorganized or avoidant. Like an avoidant might be like, oh, they need too much from me and I can't trust myself to be accountable. So I need to get out of here. And then the secure doesn't even go to Storyland, I believe. They're just like chilling and everything just feels fine and they communicate their needs. Like Jacob, for example, my beloved emotional support act, grew up in a stable home, like loving childhood, etc. And he's so securely attached, right? Like he's just like, yeah, nothing. He's immovable in a lot of ways.
Annoying.
Painfully so. That said, if something significant happened to disrupt his sense of security in a relationship, he would still have like a reaction to that. And I think that that's the thing. Like it might be a useful way to explore our dispositions and our emotional dispositions in relationship, but it's not like an overall end all be all designation. Like, for example, I'm an alcoholic. I will never not be an alcoholic. I am currently a recovering alcoholic who doesn't drink. I treat my alcoholism in other ways. That's something that like isn't just going to go away for me. But for me to be like, I'm an anxious avoidant and I'm going to be anxious avoidant forever, like that is not true. Like we can develop more capacity for rejection, for attachment, for all these things. Like we can shift these things and find relationships that are compatible.
We're here talking about attachment styles. I want to shift the conversation a bit. Earlier, you said something that really I was struck by: interdependent versus codependent. Now, there is a great discussion. What is the difference?
So codependency, and again, I think this is one of those words or frameworks that can be overprescribed or pathologized or whatever, but codependency is essentially when we don't have a sense of self, that our moods and emotions and motivations are connected inextricably to another person, right? Where it's like, I'm only okay if things are okay with this person, or I'm going to change my behavior to control an outcome, or I feel overly responsible for how someone else feels. Like I experience things disproportionately, right? And codependency is a mutual dynamic that we can activate at any time. A lot of us, especially as women and feminized people, we're taught to be codependent. We're socialized to be codependent. Like everyone else's needs are more important than mine, and there's something righteous about that, right? Interdependency is when you view your dynamics as co-creation. Like we are collectively responsible for the well-being of our relationship, of each other, with thoughtful consideration. But there's no martyrdom. There's no over sense of I have to sacrifice in order to manipulate an outcome.
Having been in a relationship that was described as codependent by my shrink, and having been in one that is described by my shrink as interdependent, I can tell you both styles have their rewards. Like both styles are okay. I mean, if two people are on board to be codependent and it works for them, no judgment. Didn't work for me. But yeah, I think that distinction was an important one to learn for me. And as I heard you say it earlier, I'm like, I really wanted you to define the two and speak to it, which thank you for doing that. Yeah, I think that's such a nice way of categorizing relationships at the risk of being oversimplifying things.
Yeah, again, these are like very general concepts. And the thing about interdependency, codependency, or hyper independence, we can activate these relationship shapes with friends, family, work. It's not just in romantic or sexual relationship. And the thing about codependency is that it comes with a lot of reward and punishment if you don't show up to the dynamic, right? And so folks who are in a codependent dynamic, you could, again, much like I was saying about attachment, like you can heal that and work towards interdependency, which is what, our communities thrive on, is that we all have something to bring and that we co-create together.
Samantha, thank you.
Thanks.
Samantha Bitty is a Toronto-based sexual health and consent educator. Find her on Instagram, Samantha_Bitty. Wondering why sexy chefs are staring at the camera doe-eyed, lathered up in olive oil, shirtless, all while making a delicious chicken dinner? Well, you will be, because thirst-trap chef influencers are kind of grabbing the internet by storm. But why? I can't wrap my head around it, but maybe talking about a man slapping meat with salt will help us through it. In a moment, answer to that burning question your mother-in-law keeps asking. Why are people watching so many videos of hot chefs? I'm David Cooper, and this is The Last Show. Well, it ain't the first show, this much I know. We'll be back.
Love, science, and the most outrageous news. It's all here. The Last Show with David Cooper.
People love food and people love looking at sexy pics online. Thirst traps. Those are those individuals who post sexy pics. But now the internet is combining both because, of course, the internet is. Online sexy chefs are winking, oiling up ingredients sensually, and making millions of followers weak in the knees. But why are these videos popular? Especially given these days, people say they're having less sex. We're here to discuss with sexual communication scholar at Arizona State University, Dr. Chelsea Reynolds. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
The earliest example I can think of these sexy chefs online is Salt Bae. He was this Middle Eastern guy, sensually sprinkling salt on meat. The internet went crazy. Do you remember that time?
Yeah, the first examples of this TikTok phenomenon that I can remember started during COVID-19 when we were stuck inside and everyone was making sourdough bread and looking at recipes online, trying to pass time. And I think that this phenomenon really overlaps with the Bear, the Chicago-focused show about chef culture and working class aesthetics, right? So I think that these two things, the COVID-19 pandemic partnered with the phenomenal TV show, The Bear, kind of coalesced and launched this trend of sexy TikTok chefs. That's the earliest I can remember it.
It's such an odd thing. I watch food videos. I don't look at thirst traps, but this idea of combining both of them, is this something you, in your wildest dreams, expected to see, or are you not surprised by this?
I don't think we can ever be surprised about where sex pops up on the internet, especially in a culture where there's kind of a squeeze on sexual content right now, right? We see lots of changes in how pornography is regulated, who can access pornography. And I think what we see happen when society is tightened like ours is at the moment is the kind of bubbling up of sex in really unexpected places. So no, did I expect sexy TikTok chefs to be this super huge trend? No, not exactly. But would in a moment like this, it make sense for sex to pop up kind of everywhere that's unexpected? Yeah, absolutely.
And it's because we're living in sexually conservative times that people are looking for these thrills wherever they can find them?
I think so. And I think that people feel a lot of shame about their sexual interests, and maybe, you know, in the context of relationships or family structures, it's not appropriate to spend all your time on Pornhub, but maybe it is acceptable to spend 3 hours a day scrolling through TikTok and watching sexy chef content. So I do think that the social morals of our time do enable this type of content to become super popular, especially for women and folks who maybe wouldn't be as comfortable exploring their sexuality in the traditional formats, like in pornography.
Is there something about food that makes it a natural vehicle for sensuality? I'm picturing the romantic dinner date or giving chocolate for Valentine's Day. Is there something about food that makes it a little different than everything else, ripe for sexual content?
I think there is something about food that makes it ripe for this type of content. I think of the traditional, bachelor party tricks of hiring someone to sit on a cake. It is erotic. There's this squishy, like mushy, gooey side to cooking that really evokes bodily fluids and makes us think of sensual acts between human beings. And I think there's a long trend of this, right? Like the connection between cooking and sex. This is an old fetish. This is an old kink, and it's certainly not new in 2025. But I do think the sensual act of eating and the sensual act of cooking is very analogous and fits well with sex.
I have watched some of these videos of chef thirst traps. That's for research for this interview, of course. I swear, it wasn't doing it as a hobby or anything. But the chefs kind of make you feel welcome. They're staring right at the camera. It kind of feels like you're there with them, almost like you know them. That's something called a parasocial relationship, when you feel like you know the people that you're watching videos of. Is it about attraction, or is it about craving intimacy, connection, even comfort with these individuals?
I think you're tapping into something really crucial here in our understanding of these videos. We are living in, as many scholars have put it, a loneliness epidemic. And when people are alone with their phones, they crave those parasocial relationships, right? So when we have fewer friends, fewer romantic partners, fewer sexual partners, we may turn to internet-mediated communication, whether that's, the chat rooms of 25 years ago or, the parasocial TikTok influencers of today, to create those intimacies that we lack. So yeah, I think we are absolutely tapping into something psychological through these videos, and the direct eye contact, the very close-up shots of hands and shoulders and abs. These feel very domestic. They feel like something you only usually get in the context of your romantic partnerships.
Most sexy online content seems to be geared towards men. I'm talking most pornography, scantily clad photos, the traditional thirst trap of an influencer posting sexy pics. But a lot of these chef ones are men performed for female audiences, which to me flips that usual gender dynamic script. Is this progress?
Oh, is this progress? I don't know if it's progress. It's definitely internet-mediated capitalism. There's a market here, right? Like, women have been ignored by the XXX industries writ large. And of course, there are counterexamples. Playboy magazine comes to mind. But I think that women are sexually liberated in a way that they haven't historically been, and they have access to these tools like TikTok to enable their sexual exploration. And these men who are running these TikTok accounts see a market there. They wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't money or some sort of emotional gratification that they were getting out of doing this type of content. So yeah, is it unique? Not necessarily. There have been some other examples of sexually explicit content marketed to women. But in this day and age, I do think a lot of this is happening in these online spaces kind of organically out of a market niche, rather than a big corporation like Playboy trying to target a specific audience.
So equal opportunity thirst trapping.
Yeah, I think it's equal opportunity thirsting. Exactly.
What's next? What could you imagine would combine one type of influencing with thirst trapping? I'm trying to picture what's next for bizarre videos online that would make people wild.
Oh my goodness. Who knows? The sky is kind of the limit here. I think any type of content that partners intimacy with something taboo is fair game. I guess I'm wondering in my world what that might look like. I don't know, maybe there'll be sexy dog walker accounts. Maybe there will be sexy airplane pilots coming out of the thin air to show us how sexy it is to fly a plane. I don't know. I think any space is open to, sexual exploration, and we can put a sexual lens on almost anything that we don't know much about or crave intimacy with.
And Instagram and TikTok and all these video sharing platforms provide an avenue to experiment. Like, no big corporation is going to try to sell us sexy pilot influencers, just like they didn't try to sell us sexy chefs. But if it pops up and the people like it, who knows what kind of videos we'll be watching in the future.
Totally. I think that is the democratizing agency that social media offers us. We are able to explore our kinks and our fetishes and our weird parasocial interests in a non-corporate space. That said, there is a lot of regulation and a lot of shadow banning that happens on meta-oriented companies, TikTok, Facebook, et cetera. So I do think we need to be careful about what type of content we put up in those particular websites, because they can get pulled down.
Well, Chelsea, I got to end the interview because I got to do more research for sexy chefs for whatever reason. I appreciate you talking to me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Chelsea Reynolds is a sexual communication scholar at Arizona State University. We come back, new findings that believing a vaccine works makes your body produce more antibodies. How, why? Answer soon.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Don't let them tell you you have to change. Just because you feel a little strange.
Breaking down today's chaos with tomorrow's headlines. The last show with David Cooper.
We often hear of stories, anecdotes, even studies of mindset playing a big role in medical outcomes. You go into an operation feeling supported, with a good attitude, and it can help with recovery. But can your thoughts about a vaccine actually change how your body reacts, how effective that vaccine is? Well, a new study suggests that maybe yes. And no, it wasn't funded by the power of big positive thinking lobby. Turns out believing a shot works might actually make it work better. I'm here with someone who worked on that study. His name is Dr. Darwin Guevarra. He works at the Department of Psychology at Miami University, and that's in Oxford, Ohio. Darwin, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For those who haven't read your study, can you explain in simple terms how your mindset about a vaccine can actually help with your body's response to it? This is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, so what we did is we ran a prospective study. That just means that we grabbed a bunch of people, we sampled a bunch of people, and at time one, we measured a bunch of things, including what they believe about the vaccine. So, for example, if they think that the vaccine is going to be effective, if they think that their body is going to respond well to the vaccine, or even if they think that the side effects of the vaccine is a sign that it's working. Right. So at time one, that's what we did. And then we followed them a month afterwards. And then we grabbed their blood a month after and then 6 months after. And we measured what's this thing called neutralizing antibody response. It's this really cool immune system process where we pick people's blood and we have this pseudovirus, right? So the COVID pseudovirus. And then we put them in there to see how quickly it neutralizes that virus. Right, so we're able to quantify that, and the how quickly it does that is a measurement, presumably, of how effective the vaccine is in your system. Right, so that's your antibody response.
So it's long known that the placebo effect, which is when you think a medicine is going to work well, or the nocebo effect, that's when you think a medicine is going to work badly, has a major effect on outcomes. Now, I don't think positive thinking is going to save you from like a bad gunshot wound, but is that what's going on here? Do we know what actually is causing this correlation?
Yeah, actually, in 2019, Lauren Howie and one of the co-authors too, Leah Crumb's group, did a study on peanut allergies, so oral immunotherapy treatment for peanut allergies. And what they did is they actually manipulated people's side effect mindsets, right? Or if you think that the side effects, the way that you respond to it will be good for you. And they found robust effects sort of in immune responding in that paper as well. And so as far as I know, that's the only paper that sort of comes to mind in how sort of side effect experience can impact immune responding.
It's wild that like our conscious thoughts in our brain can subconsciously affect our immune system. And this goes as far as vaccine efficacy. But let's get a little weird. I want to stretch this to like the most extreme. If I believed sneezing after a vaccine would make me immortal, obviously that wouldn't happen. So like how far can this be stretched? Like how much of a positive benefit can I get believing a medical device, a medical vaccine, a medication, whatever, it would be effective? How much more effective could it really be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the limits of it is an interesting question. Like how far can you actually get it to go? I would say not that far, I don't think.
No, so you're saying I won't be immortal if I sneeze?
Yes.
Okay.
But I do think that having a general positive attitude towards a vaccine, believing that the side effect is going to be working, and that your body's going to respond to it, it's better to have those things than not, right? Because you mentioned nocebo effect earlier too, right? So you could benefit yourself slightly a little bit, or if you go the other way around, you can actually make things worse for you, right? So I think that the other way around is actually stronger. So there's a sort of common finding in psychology is that the bad is stronger than good, and I think that's one of those things in this case as well, where the nocebo effect for these type of things is worse off than the actual sort of placebo effect.
And for those we lost, those would be people that got a vaccine and then had some negative belief about it.
Yeah.
And then observed negative effects because they had a negative belief.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the placebo effect, but it's sort of the opposite. It's
kind of like its evil cousin.
It's its evil cousin, and it's just as strong, if not stronger.
The effects tend to be stronger for nocebo effects, because if you're hyper anxious about getting the vaccine, it actually activates your stress response. And the stress response has a sort of these downstream negative consequences on your immune system, because, it releases cortisol in your system, it ramps up your autonomic nervous system. And so it has this sort of global systematic impact on how you're taking in the vaccine, not only from a psychology standpoint, but from a physiological one.
I have a question here. If you explain this to people and you say, we're going to give you a vaccine, it's somewhat effective, but if you believe it's very effective, it'll be more effective. So now they're aware of this positive belief mechanism. Does it still have a positive impact, or do they have to not know that it works that way and have that belief, or we don't know that yet?
So I actually do work on what's called non-deceptive placebos or open label placebos, right? And I think if you actually tell people in an honest way and you educate them about it, you still get similar effects than if you do it deceptively. So as far as I know, we haven't done this study yet, but I'd be willing to bet that if you just educate people about it, and then you frame it in this way where you don't activate sort of ego defenses and that you're trying to convince them of something, I think you could get it to work.
I wonder if these findings could go well beyond vaccines, like things that are pretty risky, like chemotherapy or recovery from a traumatic injury. You just kind of tell them, if you believe this will work well, you will have a better outcome. Is that something that we might want to do in the future for medicine?
I think that we have to be ethically careful with those kind of things. So the vaccine, I think for the most part, is sort of an area. It is a controversial area, but I think it's less serious than, recovering from sort of cancer treatment or recovering from surgery. But there is such a thing as a placebo sham surgery, right? Where if you think that you're going under you're going under some sort of surgery that's going to help you with pain, even if you don't actually receive the actual surgery, you do tend to show improvements. So they've done those studies. They tend to be risky, but there is some sort of evidence that in some cases it could still work.
That's really interesting. Well, Darwin, thanks for chatting to me about your study. I appreciate your time today.
Cool. Sounds good, David. Thank you.
Dr. Darwin Guevarra works at the Department of Psychology at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. All right, some things to tell you, listener, singular intended, about. Want to get in touch with the show? Leave us a voicemail. Got any feedback? Creatively bad feedback, definitely appreciated. Give us a phone call. The number is 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-8888. That's too many eights. That's 1-888-505-6644. Send us a text message. It's a toll-free number. Also, like anything you heard tonight but you tuned in late, or you're going to miss us on a given night, well, The Last Show is available as a podcast. Just head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com, pizza. And there you can find out more information about our podcast and links to all our social media accounts. Give the show a follow. We would love to hear from you. All right, those are the announcements. Aren't you so glad you listened to them? Okay, the music should be coming any minute now. Any minute now, the music is going to be here. There it is. All right, that's the show. Thank you so much for listening to it. We'll be back tomorrow night with things like the following. Sorry to break the news to you, freaky, sexy people. choking is not safe, even amongst consenting adults. That's according to the research. Also tomorrow night, 4 tiny planets discovered around one of our nearest stars. That'll be a great show, and we will see you then. I am David Cooper, and this is The Last Show.